welcome back. Today is Monday, April the 24th, and I wanted to go ahead and get a head start on our cake today. You can see I'm using nothing special, just a plain box mix from Walmart, and I'm going to follow the directions on the back of the box and get this mixed up. I did want to give a word of advice that the one box mix that I have found that doesn't work well for a tiered cake is funfetti. And the reason for this is because the fetty mix only calls to use egg whites, and to have your cake stay sturdy enough for you to stack it into multiple tiered layers, you really need the denseness that the whole egg provides. So if you choose to use funfetti, definitely use the whole egg instead of just the egg whites. Otherwise, it is going to completely crumble and fall apart. Ask me how I know. So moving on, I'm going to grease my two 9-inch cake pans with butter. I have personally never found a reason to line my pans with parchment paper or even do a flour coating, but if that works best for you, then definitely do that. I'm going to evenly split the batter between the two pans the best that I can and get this in the oven for the recommended bake time. My first set of cakes are done and cooled, so I'm going to follow the same steps and get that second box of cake baked up. Now that all of my cakes are cooled, I'm going to get them wrapped in plastic wrap and get them popped into the freezer. Now, the three reasons that I like to do this is, reason one, it really does allow me to prep days in advance if needed. And I find that for me, it is very stressful the day of to bake the cake, let the cake cool, and then get the cake decorated. So I really enjoy being able to prep it days or even a day in this case in advance because it just works out so much easier for me. Reason two is it makes cutting and leveling the cakes so much easier if you do it when they're frozen opposed to just room temperature or trying to do it when they're hot. I tend to make a lot of mistakes that way. And it just works so much better to level them from frozen. And finally, I find that it helps to cut down on the amount of cake crumbs that end up in my icing during decorating. So I'm just going to continue getting all of these wrapped and prepped for the freezer. Alright friends, I got all the cakes wrapped, so in the freezer they go, and I will see you guys back on Tuesday to finish up the cake decorating process. Hey friends, and happy Tuesday. It is officially Tuesday, April the 25th, and today we're going to go ahead and move through and get our cake decorated. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pull our cakes that we made yesterday from the freezer. So the very first step that we're going to have to do is we need to get these all completely leveled out. So I'm going to show you how to level out your frozen cakes. So I just pulled out a really big, long, serrated knife. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take one of these cakes, and then I'll move you guys in closer so that you can get a better look. But I'm just going to take a second and get this completely unwrapped. pretty mounded, but the bottom is completely flat. So we're just going to take a second and get this flattened out. The best way to do this is to lay your knife completely flat on the edge and just run it back and forth until you go all the way across. Now, it doesn't get it all the first time, but as you start to remove layers, always come back to where you started and start edging away from that starting point. And just keep turning your cake until you have made your way completely around the entire thing. Now, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but as long as you can get it pretty flat, that's what you're looking for. And I never throw away any of these cake scraps that come off of the top. I always reserve these in a Ziploc bag that I can pop into the refrigerator or the freezer, because all of these scraps are really good for making cake pops. So keep that in mind. Don't throw away your scraps. So I'm going to continue the process with the other three, and I'm going to move you guys in closer so that you can get a better look. Okay, so I'm going to get this second one unwrapped. That way you guys can see a little closer up what we're doing here to understand. Okay, so this one isn't as mounded as the last one, but a little closer look. This is the bottom and this is the top. So I'm going to find a starting edge that's pretty flat, and once again I'm going to lay my knife completely flat to the edge, and I'm going to slowly work it back and forth. I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to start at that starting point again and just run that knife back and forth. It is definitely okay if it comes out in little pieces instead of big pieces. You don't have to get it all completely smooth on the first go around. I would say that one's pretty good. And just to show you guys, I mean, even I, after all this time messed up, I went a little in more, but that's okay. As long as it is almost completely flat, that way when you go to stack that other cake on top, you're just looking for it to, for the most part, stack up evenly instead of one laying more towards the side or one laying more like this. So as long as they come up pretty straight, you are on the right track. So I'm going to go ahead and repeat the process and get the two other ones completely evened on the top, and get these scraps moved over to my scrap bag. Let's move over to go ahead and get started on frosting this. So I just have a turntable decorating platter. I picked this up, I think, at Walmart or maybe Hobby Lobby, but nothing fancy. And I have a 10-inch cake board that I picked up from Walmart as well. Since our cakes are 9 inches, the 10-inch round will do just fine. And right now, all we're going to do is we're going to put icing in between our layers. So once again, I'm using nothing special, just the Great Value frosting from Walmart. And I'm going to keep mine just plain and white, but if you want to add food coloring, go ahead and do that too. So the first thing that we need to do is to get our cake to stay secure to our cake board. We're going to take just a little bit of frosting and put it right in the middle to act as glue. Now, for your first cake, you want to make sure that you actually put the bottom of the cake as the bottom that's going to connect to that, because that is for sure your most flattest layer of your cake starting off. So I just plopped that right in the middle the best that I could. Now, my goal when it comes to the frosting is I'm going to use about half of this container in between each layer. Now, you could definitely add sprinkles to the middle layers, or maybe some chocolate chips, or if you want to add some kind of jam as well. You put the flavors in between your cakes of whatever suits your taste the best, or whatever it is that you're looking for. So I am just being very generous and putting a whole bunch of icing right there. Like I said, about half of the container. Now, I'm pretty sure we all know how to ice a cake. It is nothing fancy at this point. We just want to get it smeared right there so that we have some glue to help the next layer stay into place. Now, what I suggest is not going all the way necessarily to the edge of the cake. Try to keep a little bit of a lip, but if you go over, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. This doesn't have to look pretty. It doesn't have to be even. We just want to get a good amount of frosting on there to act as glue. So I'm going to take our second cake layer and put that right on top. And then I'm going to repeat the process all the way up until we have all of our layers on our cake. I went back and I watched that, guys, and it was very blurry that first time. So let me keep this one slow. So in case you didn't catch it, I apologize for that. So I'm taking that other half of that frosting from this can and getting it on top of this cake. I'm just going to evenly get it all over the top, trying not to go right to the edge, keeping a little lip. Remember, this doesn't have to look pretty. If some crumbs get in it, that's okay too. It's going to be hidden. It's not a really big deal. So I got that second layer of frosting on. I'm going to take that third cake layer now and get that on top. Kind of give it a smush. And now I'm going to get some frosting on the top of this layer. Now, when it comes to the very last layer of your cake, you want the top of your cake to be just as even as the bottom. So for that last cake that you carved out, the part that you carved, I want you to flip it and put this side to the icing. That way your super flat side, which was technically the bottom of your cake, is now your top. And that's going to help to make sure that your cake looks really even and uniform. So I just flipped that upside down and put that one as the top. I'm just going to kind of turn it and make sure that everything feels, for the most part, pretty even to the sides. Going to give it a look over and make sure it looks completely straight, and I think we're good. So the next thing that we're going to move on to is getting icing around the sides and icing on the top of this. Okay, so to ice the sides and ice the top, I still have half of a container of frosting right here, and then I have 3 more as backups because I like to do my icing very thick. That way I don't have to do a crumb coat. So I'm going to go ahead and give my knife a good clean. Scrape off that extra frosting. And what I'm going to start by doing is taking a very large, good dollop of icing because I need to go through and I need to fill these cracks essentially. So I'm just going to kind of start. Let me find the best angle to do this. And I'm just going to push it right up against the side. And I'm not worrying about smoothing it out right now. I just want to make sure that I'm getting the cracks filled. Okay, so we have all of the cracks completely filled. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to give this a very smooth edge. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my frosting very heavily and I'm going to slap it on all of these sides. I'm not going to worry about smoothing it out. I just want a very thick layer of frosting covering the outside of this cake. Now it is going to look a little wonky at first, but trust the process. So like I said, I'm going to take lots of frosting, lots of it. And I'm just going to start putting it on the outside of the cake in really thick layers. And I'm going to do this to the entire cake. If it drips down on your cake board, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so right now, as you can tell, there is just a very rough layer of icing completely around this cake. Now, the reason that we do so much icing on the outside to start off with is it really helps to trap all of the crumbs. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to get a bench scraper and we need to scrape the outside of this cake to get more of a smoother finish. If this right here is the best that you can do, that is perfectly fine, guys. Put some icing on the top and call it done. It doesn't have to look pretty. It just has to taste good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull out my bench scraper and I'm going to give it a scrape all the way around the edges so that we can give this a really smooth finish. When it comes to scraping your edges, you have a few options. There is the typical long spatula scraper. There is a actual icing scrape, but I have found, hear me out, the best thing is I went to the home improvement section of the store, and this is actually for mudding your walls if you're doing drywall work. But because this is so big, I find that using this is a lot easier for me to control than trying to use one of these other options here. But definitely play around with what works best for you. But this is a very cheap, inexpensive option, and it works really good. So I'm just going to take a second and start scraping the sides of this cake. I do have a bowl over here so that once I scrape the icing, I can wipe the extra icing off into this bowl. Now, to do this, the best way is you want to start with putting the edge of this towards the bottom of the cake, and you're going to slowly turn the cake board and it's going to pull that icing. You don't want to dig in hard with this because then you're going to release all the crumbs underneath. So I just put it up to the edge and I slowly start to turn my cake stand. And I let the cake stand do the work. I just hold this edge in place until I can make a smooth pass all the way around the cake. Which this is why we put so much frosting on it, so that when it goes to scrape, it doesn't release any of those crumbs underneath. So after one pass, I have this frosting right here, and I'm just going to get it wiped onto my bowl. And repeat the process until I like how smooth it looks all the way around. I want to give you some up close views here. You can see the icing is really smooth all the way right here, but once I get to right here, there is some gapping that it didn't go all the way down. I do have a crumb right here. And try to remember too, guys, that this is frosting that we're working with. It's not fondant, so it isn't ever going to be completely smooth. Now, when it comes to the options where you have little gaps like this down here and back over here where there's big gapping down here, we are going to put an icing border down here, so that always covers up a lot of my gapping. But if you did not want to put a border on the bottom of your cake, what you would do is you would go back in with your butter knife that we used to put the thick icing on, and you would add another big thick layer of icing right down here to fill that gap, and then you would repeat the process of smoothing the cake out. I think for the most part that I'm happy with it. I'll probably put a little bit of icing. No, I probably will not put some icing there to cover that crumb because I'll probably just decorate over it. But I will put some icing back down here and smooth it over one last time. But other than that, I think we're pretty good. We're going to go ahead and get the top frosted, and then we'll move on to more of the decorating. So let me get some icing right here. I'm just going to use that icing that we were scraping into our bowl. I'm just going to go right here to that thick part, and I'm just going to slather it in there. And then I'm going to run it over one last time. I think since I'm here, I am going to put some icing right there. Okay, I'm going to put a big glob of icing over that crumb. And then I'm going to give this one more smooth over, and I think we'll be good to go. Okay, so to frost the top of the cake, we're going to kind of do the same exact process that we did for the sides. I'm going to put a very thick layer of icing on the top to really help trap in the crumbs when we go to spread it with the scraper. Okay, I'm going to start off with my butter knife, and I'm just going to kind of get it spread over the top in a really thick layer. Pulling it all the way to the edge. Okay, so we have a really rough edge on the top, and we're going to go back in with our scraper, making sure that it's, for the most part, icing free. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from the edge, and we're going to pull the frosting in. So we're going to start, like I said, from the edge, and we're just going to pull the icing back, and then we're going to wipe off the frosting in between each swipe. Start from the edge and bring it in. The top is always a little bit more tricky because you can't spin it with the edge right next to it like you can on the side. So you just have to give it multiple swipes. So I have some gapping right here and over here. So I'm going to do what we did for the side. And I'm going to take some of that reserved icing that we scraped and I'm going to put it on those parts really thick. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to scrape it back towards the middle. Okay, now what you can do is you can put it like this, close to that edge, and you can twirl it, turn your turntable, and go in a circular motion. And just follow it all the way around, making a swirl until you get to the center of the top of this cake. And you may have to do it a couple of times to get it as smooth as you would like for the eye. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. I am going to put a topper on this, so I'm not too worried about it. But now you can see we have all of this extra frosting hanging over the edge. And the simple fix to that is just to take that scraper back to the side and run it along the edge. And it will help create that really sharp edge. Okay, so far so good. The last thing that we're going to do is you're going to take your butter knife, if that works best for you, and I'm just going to get the excess icing off of mine. And I'm going to very gently find the edge and just pull that edge back and remove the icing each time. Until I get rid of all these harsh edges. Now, like I said, I am going to put a cake topper on top of mine, so it is going to cover a lot of these imperfections. Okie doke. I am pretty happy with how it is looking so far. Like I said, we're going to get a lot of this covered with borders and icing. So it is going to hide a lot of this. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Okay, so before I can add the frosting border to our cake, I need to figure out something with my cake topper. Now, I did the same exact thing that I did when we laminated those pieces of paper for our cookies. This is just an image that I printed out, laminated with that tape. The same thing with this one as well, and I just attached it to a skewer so that I can stick it into the cake. But what I'm talking about with this is that I have some birthday candles here. Well, he's not turning 21, not yet. So I have some birthday candles here, and once I get this stuck to the top of my cake, I need a way to be able to stick these through and they adhere to the cake as well as this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the outer edge of these numbers down here at the bottom. So I'm going to put it up in it. Bloop, 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 bloop. I'm going to put it up against the edge of my image and basically figure out where I want the numbers to set. And let's see, probably going to put them way up here at the top, I think. So I'm going to place it right there. I'm just going to take a pen and trace around the bottom just so I can have a reference point to see. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing with this one too, of where I want it placed, and get it traced out around the bottom. And then figuring out where I want this to set, I'll probably put it right here. So I'm going to put a little dot right here. Because this is laminated, obviously we can't stick anything through it, so we need to make some pre-cut holes. So right over here where I put that skewer, I'm just going to make a little hole right there. That way, once I have this on the top of the cake, you can see now I can just push this through there and it's going to go into the cake. And right here where I did these, I'm just going to kind of fold this over and make a little slit in there. That way I can cut out a square so that my numbers will be able to go through this paper as well. I know this is really confusing and it's not making much sense right now with the way that I'm trying to explain it to you, but you will definitely see here in a second. So I'm just going to get those little pieces cut out. So as you can kind of see now, I have this square here. That way when I put this on the top of my cake, I can shimmy this thing. Well, I need to cut it a little bit bigger. So this way, when it goes on top of the cake, I can fit this number down in here and it will stand on the top of the cake. And you can see that you can't see any of those imperfections of where we cut it. So you don't have to worry about it being straight. You just want to be able to make sure that you can get it to go through your laminated piece. That way it can stick securely in the top of your cake. So let's go ahead and get our cake moved back over. And you just want to determine what is going to be the front of your cake and what you want to be the back of your cake. I'm going to have this be the back of my cake because my icing is not as smooth back there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that laminated piece of paper and I'm going to place it right on the top and smush it down the best that I can to get it to lay as flat and evenly as I can. Now, the reason that I like to put an icing border on the top of my cake is because I do typically use these laminated piece of papers as cake toppers, and they like to leave a ruffled edge, and so when I put that icing up against it as a border, it really helps to hide a lot of this. So that's the reason that I do it. So I think I have this on here about as smooth as I can get it and about as even as I can get it. So I have my 1 and my number 2 candle in here, and I'm going to go ahead and take that skewer and put it through that pre-made hole that we made in the top of this as well, and just get it pushed all the way down. And there we go. We have our cake topper, our little happy birthday sign, and our 1 and 2 candles. So now we're going to move on to putting a border on the outside of this as well as the bottom, and then getting some more decorations added to this cake. So we're going to start with the border around the bottom, and all I did was I took 1 more can of frosting and I added some red gel food coloring to this and put it inside one of those disposable piping bags like I showed you guys the other day. Now, to do this the best way, let me figure out how I can show you guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to squeeze until it makes a dot, and then we're going to pull. And then we're going to start right there at the end, make a dot, and we're going to pull. Make a dot and pull. Make a dot and pull. So I'm just going to repeat this process until I have the complete bottom of the cake lined out. Hello? Hello? She said I can go? Whoa. Oh, snap. Now that we have the bottom all frosted around, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put a border up around here at the top so that we can hide some of these imperfections of where our topper didn't lay flat. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to put a dot, and then I'm going to drag, put a dot and drag, put a dot and drag, and then I'm just going to go ahead and get this completely bordered out. Next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add some sprinkles all around my cake. I just have this leftover mix here that I had gotten from Amazon. It has some black, some red, some white, and these are actually some leftover Christmas sprinkles that I got when they decided to discount everything, and these ones are silver. So I'm just going to go ahead and get these two mixed together in this bowl, and then get some sprinkles probably around the bottom edging and around the top. So let's get to it. thing that I want to do is I just have a bunch of cutout images here that I laminated up, and I'm going to go ahead and try to get these positioned all over the cake the best that I can, whatever looks the best. So I'm just going to take a second and take all these laminated pieces of paper and get them over the cake. All right, friends, here we go. Here's our finished product. We've got the top here, going down the sides. See everything that we did. I really like it. I think it turned out so cute, even though my 12-year-old probably isn't going for cute. I think it turned out great. I think we did a good job. It looks really straight, it looks even, our frosting looks great. So there we have it. There's our birthday cake. Well, friends, we did it. We basically got it all done, and that is the birthday cake checked off of the to-do list. I'm going to go ahead and take the cake and pop it right back into the freezer until we're ready for it on Saturday. If you're new here, hi, welcome. We're so glad to have you. We have been doing a mini series documenting everything from start to finish for planning my son's 12th birthday party, and I have taken all of these videos and compiled them into a party planning playlist. So if you need to reference back to anything, they're there, and this video will be there as well. But I want to say thanks for taking time out of your day to spend time with me, friends. I had a blast with you guys as always. And be sure to check back in with me, because the next thing that we need to get accomplished is we need to get all of the birthday gifts bagged up. We need to decorate the kitchen and the dining room for a mini little birthday dinner, and we also need to get a birthday dinner dessert made. So I'm really excited to share that recipe with you guys too. But until next time, I'll see you later, friends. Bye.